This is Turd Flinging Monkey for TFM News. I'm going to be, in a minor way, responding to an article called Cologne Sexual Assault Victim Called a Racist and Harassed After Identifying Her Attackers from Breitbart.com, written by John Sexton. Now, this article is from a few days ago, but I had to comment on this because I've actually made videos about this subject in the past. Now, in the previous video, I talked about how this is all a big shit test, but I think people don't understand what a shit test is and how passing it or failing it and how that all works, because a lot of it is completely subconscious. And this is why I'm not even really talking about this article. So basically the article is this woman gave an interview on German TV after she was attacked on New Year's Eve by a bunch of Muslims, and she was called a racist in social media. So, I mean, that's the whole article. I don't really give a shit. What I want to talk about is the shit test. I want to kind of break down what a shit test is, the psychology behind the shit test, and how exactly passing it works and how not passing it works. A shit test is when a woman basically makes a demand on a man to see how he'll respond. Now, there's a common misconception that this is somehow a woman testing her boundaries and that she secretly wants the man to push against her. That is not correct. I mean, sometimes women will do that kind of bullshit. They'll try to get away with something to see if they can, but for the most part, they really want you to give in to them. They want to break you. They want to train you like a dog. The reason why failing the shit test is going along with what the woman wants, basically giving in to her demands. The reason why this ultimately hurts the man is because the woman becomes a spoiled child. And you see this if you know any parents who have spoiled children. The kids hate the parents, and it makes no sense. You have these parents giving their kid everything they want, and in the end the kids hate them for it, because children require discipline and leadership. And women subconsciously don't want to get everything they want. They do at the time. If you strap them to a lie detector, they really do want you to give them what they're asking for. But in the end, they'll lose respect for you. And as I explained in my Hacking Hypergamy video, women are always looking for a better man. And by giving into them constantly, you are signaling to them that you are lower than them. If you constantly tell them to fuck off and there's the door, don't let it hit you on the way out, you're signaling to them that you're higher than them. So they'll actually feel more contented being with you if you treat them like shit versus if you give in to them all the time. Now, some people believe there's a happy medium, but I want to explain kind of the bigger picture, especially in regards to the Muslim situation and feminism. But if you really think about it, these extremist Muslim terrorist groups and feminists have a lot in common. Neither of them are held responsible for their actions. I mean, yeah, they are, attacked and criticized, but whenever someone tries to kind of expand that to a larger group, everyone's like, whoa, 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 whoa. Okay, listen, it's not all Muslims or the majority of Muslims. It's just this very, very, very small percentage of Muslims. Not all Muslims are like that. It's only the ones who are actively going out and killing people. Those are the ones we should be worried about, not the, silent majority that simply just passively supports them, which is fucking retarded. So you see the same exact rationale for feminism. So you have the majority of women don't identify as feminists. The majority of women don't go out, picketing in the streets, screaming at men on camera, telling them to shut the fuck up with their red hair and all that. Most women don't do that. What most women do is simply vote for politicians who will give them free shit, which is basically the end goal of feminism itself. Most women don't even identify as feminists. But if you ask them things like, should women get this, and should women get that, and should men be punished here, and should men be punished there, they'll support all those things. They passively support feminism, even if they don't apply the label to themselves. Anyway, back to shit tests. What is a shit test, and how does passing it work? So when a woman gives you a list of demands or tries to manipulate you, she really does want you to give into her and give her what she wants. She will lose respect for you. She will ultimately exercise her hypergamy and try to leave you for someone else if she loses too much respect for you, but she doesn't secretly want you to push back. But when you look at the larger context, it makes sense. A woman needs a man, whereas a man does not need a woman. Men like women, because we like sex. We have a much higher sex drive than a woman. This sex drive that nature gave us, it really sucks, because it puts us in a position where we make really stupid choices simply to satisfy that sex drive. And one of these choices is to put up with women's shit because we're fucking them. However, a man doesn't need to have sex, despite what some people will tell you. Even if you stop masturbating, stop having sex, stop masturbating, you're not going to die. Your balls aren't going to explode. You got people in various religious communities that go completely celibate, don't masturbate, live long, healthy lives, do all kinds of good stuff. So you don't need sex. It's not a legitimate health need. However, women need men, because without men, where are they going to get their shit from? I mean, yeah, they could get it from the government, but the government is paid for by men. Men pay 70% of the taxes. So if women aren't getting their resources directly from men, they're getting resources indirectly from men. At the end of the day, they need men. The way you pass a shit test is you put the fear of being abandoned in the woman. So in one of my old videos, like when I first started my channel, I talked about in my guide to being an asshole to women for fun and profit, hacking into her survival instinct by basically being an asshole to her because she fears abandonment, because she legitimately needs the man, whereas the man really doesn't need the woman. Now, it may have been true 100 some odd years ago that a woman actually brought something to the table besides simply sex, but that's really all she brings to the table these days. Anything else she brings to the table is not worth the price that she costs you, even just monetarily. In fact, CS MGTOW did an excellent video that I'll link to in the description, which demonstrates this, and I did a video a long time ago about the same concept myself. But the point is, when you understand that women need men far more than men need women, when you pass the shit test, quote unquote, you're basically telling the woman, I don't need you. And that realization instills fear in her, and then she will submit rather than be a bitch. This is how you, quote, pass the shit test. It's all based on fear. Fear of being abandoned and left alone. Now, if she has other options, she may not have that fear. But in lieu of those options, she will submit rather than be cast out. So now let's talk about, the Muslim situation in Germany. So you have these migrant, refugee, Muslim, whatever the fuck, coming into Germany, assaulting women, and anyone who says anything against it is a racist. It's delicious in its irony. And this is the result of the society emasculating itself. This is the bonobo society coming to fruition, and its chickens coming home to roost. Now, as I said in a previous video, in bonobos, which are a subspecies of chimpanzee, they live in an environment where they have no predators, and they have abundant resources because they live right along the Congo. So in this little isolated pocket of the Congo, they live pretty well. Because they live pretty well, because they have no threats, the women have dominated the men. And over time, they've bred out masculinity until the bonobo has become less sexually dimorphic. This has several implications. Bonobos are smaller than chimpanzees. In fact, they were once known as pygmy chimpanzees because they were so small. They're also less intelligent than chimpanzees. They don't use tools, whereas chimpanzees have been known to use tools. But most importantly, they are far more vulnerable than chimpanzees. Chimpanzees exist on several different countries. Despite being endangered, they're very hardy and adaptable. Bonobos would go fucking extinct if they had any sort of predation in their environment. They become so dependent on their soft, safe environment that if any threat was introduced, they'd be fucked. Now, let's equate this to Western civilization. Western civilization has become completely emasculated, and they become like the bonobos. We have this abundance, we don't have a lot of threats, there hasn't really been a major war since the end of the Cold War, which, if you remember from another video, as soon as the Cold War ended, third wave feminism began because the threat had passed. With an absence of threats and abundant resources, the attack on masculinity began. But the result of this attack on masculinity is an emasculated West. And then what do you have? You have a threat introduced, and you're fucked. The women don't have the capability to stand against a threat, and the men have been completely emasculated. Such is the fate of a bonobo. Without some sort of powerful caretaker to protect them from outside threats, they're fucked. Left to their own devices, there's nothing they can do to protect themselves. They become too weak and emasculated. And the funny thing is, the women don't even suffer the consequences of this. When, and let's just say hypothetically, when these Muslims take over Europe, they're not going to kill the women, they're going to kill the men, and they'll take your women. But the point is, the women who caused the emasculation, who caused the collapse of their own society, don't even suffer for it. I mean, they do in a way. They would have a lower standard of living, and they wouldn't have all the privileges they currently have once the patriarchy is reestablished. But they're not being murdered the way the men are. So it's sad that the men, by allowing the women to walk all over them for all these decades, allowing themselves to be emasculated, have basically doomed themselves. So what are you going to do about it? Anyway, this is Turd Flaming Monkey signing off.